You are listening to Rewritten Fates, a dark fantasy romance series. Book 1, I Woke Up as the Condemned Duchess. Chapter 4, The Duke's Suspicion. The great chapel emptied with agonizing slowness. Nobles drifted toward the towering oak doors in clusters of rustling silk and hushed whispers, their voices rising like a tide now that the Saintess had concluded her blessing. I could feel the weight of their eyes lingering on my back as they retreated into the palace corridors. Some were merely curious, others were visibly disappointed. They had come expecting a spectacle, a villainess unmasked and screaming in the presence of the divine. Instead, they had witnessed a wedding, and in its wake, they were left with a mystery they couldn't solve. Soon, only a few shadows remained in the vast, echoing chamber. The king had already departed with his guard. The Saintess had vanished into the crowd like a fading light. The priests moved like ghosts, quietly extinguishing the tall candles along the altar, leaving the chapel to fall into a heavy amber twilight. And through it all, Duke Alaric remained, standing beside me, waiting. I could feel the pressure of his gaze long before I turned to meet it. When I finally looked up, he was studying me with a quiet, terrifying intensity. He wasn't angry, nor was he cruel. He was simply calculating. He looked at me the way a general might look at a map of enemy territory. "You surprised the Saintess," he said. His voice was low and steady. It wasn't a compliment. It was a cold observation of fact. "I'm glad I could provide a moment of entertainment for the court," I replied, my tone light, though my heart was hammering against my ribs. Alaric didn't smile. His expression remained as unmoving as the stone saints carved into the walls. "That wasn't entertainment, Elara." He stepped closer, and the space between us vanished in an instant. Up close, the Duke was even more imposing than the book had described. He was taller, his presence more physical, more visceral. I could smell the faint, sharp scent of polished steel and expensive leather clinging to his black uniform. He was a man built for the blood of the battlefield, not the perfumes of a ceremony. "You drank the holy water without reacting," he continued, his eyes searching mine. "By every law of the heavens and this kingdom, that should have been impossible." I lifted an eyebrow, leaning into the role of the defiant Duchess. "Is my lack of agony a problem for you, Grace?" "Yes." His answer was immediate, sharp as a blade. "Because the Saintess expected something to happen. She expected you to break." "So did the court," I countered. "Yes." "And yet, nothing did." He fell silent, his gaze dropping briefly to the hollow of my throat. The mark of the betrayer rested there against my pale skin, faint, bruised, but undeniably present. "You're supposed to be a liar," he said, his voice dropping to a gravelly whisper. "I'm sure I have many flaws, Alaric. I'm only human." "That mark reacts to deception. It is the infallible judge of the crown." "Is it?" I challenged. "Or is it simply what people have been told to believe?" His eyes snapped back to mine. "You're remarkably calm for someone who is less than 3 days away from an executioner's blade." There it was, the real question, the one I had been dreading. Why wasn't I terrified? The truth was, I was vibrating with a primal, bone-deep terror. But I had lived enough of my real life to know that panic was a luxury I couldn't afford. Panic wouldn't rewrite my fate. Only strategy would. I suppose, I said, looking him dead in the eye, that screaming and pulling at my hair wouldn't exactly improve my situation, would it? Something flickered in the molten gold of his eyes. It wasn't quite approval. It was closer to a dark curiosity. For a moment, neither of us spoke. The chapel had grown tomb quiet now. The last of the servants had vanished, leaving only the soft, dying crackle of the altar candles. Then, without warning, Alaric reached forward. His hand clamped around my wrist. My breath hitched, my heart leaping into my throat. His grip wasn't rough, but it was firm, an iron reminder that he could crush the delicate bones of my arm without a second thought. He turned my wrist slowly, examining the skin as if looking for a hidden brand. "For what?" I managed to ask, my voice sounding steadier than I felt. "Evidence," he replied calmly. "Of what? My lack of a soul?" "Dark magic." His thumb grazed the pulse point of my wrist. "The rumors say you bartered with shadows to poison the Saintess." When he found nothing but pale, unblemished skin, he released me. His hand dropped to his side, but he didn't move away. "You don't feel like the woman they described," he said quietly. The sentence sent a fresh ripple of cold through my chest. Careful. I was walking on a tightrope over a pit of fire. "And what woman did they describe to you, Alaric?" "Cruel." His gaze sharpened, tracking the movement of my lips. "Impulsive and utterly reckless." I tilted my head, the silver hair spilling over my shoulder. "Do I seem reckless to you?" "No." The answer came far too quickly. It meant he had already analyzed my behavior and reached a conclusion. Alaric folded his arms slowly, his shadow looming over me. "You seem controlled, precise." My heart skipped a beat. This was the danger of being me instead of the real Elara. The original Villainess had been a creature of high emotion, arrogant, volatile, and prone to lashing out when cornered. She had made mistakes because she couldn't control her own fire. I was doing the opposite. I was ice, and the Duke was far too smart not to notice the change in temperature. "You've spent weeks in a damp prison cell," he continued, his voice dropping an octave. "Yet you stand before the entire court and before me without a single tremor of fear." I met his golden gaze with everything I had. Perhaps prison gave me perspective. There is nothing like a stone wall and a death sentence to help one find their focus. He watched me for a long, heavy moment. The silence between us felt thick, charged with a strange, magnetic tension. Then he leaned closer, so close I could feel the heat of his body, the warmth of his breath ghosting against the shell of my ear. "You're hiding something, Elara," he murmured. My pulse jumped, a frantic rhythm against my collarbone. "Everyone in this palace is hiding something, Alaric," I whispered back. "I'm just the only one who had the misfortune of getting caught." For the first time since we had met, the corner of the Duke's mouth twitched. It wasn't a smile, not really, but it was the ghost of one. He stepped back, the oppressive weight of his presence lifting just enough for me to breathe again. "You have 48 hours, he said, his tone returning to that of a commanding officer. 48 hours to convince the king and me that you deserve to keep your head. And if I fail?" His answer was a flat, honest line of steel. "Then I will escort you to the pyre myself. I do not tolerate traitors, even those I have married. Direct, honest, terrifying." He turned toward the chapel doors, his heavy cloak swishing against the marble. He stopped at the threshold, but he didn't look back. "And Duchess?" "Yes? If you truly want to survive this?" He glanced over his shoulder, the candlelight catching the amber of his eyes. "Start by telling me why the Saintess looked afraid of you." Then he walked out of the chapel, his footsteps echoing into the darkness of the palace. I was left standing alone beneath the dying candlelight, the silence of the chapel pressing in on me. I realized then that while the Saintess was a threat to my life, the Duke was a threat to my soul. He wasn't my enemy, not yet, but he was far more dangerous, because if he ever discovered the truth, that the woman he married was a ghost in a stolen body, I had no idea what he would do. But I knew one thing for certain: he wouldn't let me go. But in the royal court, nothing is ever truly over. Secrets move in the shadows, and every choice rewrites fate. Continue the story in the next episode of Rewritten Fates, and subscribe so you don't miss what happens next.